Due to the graphic nature of this program, viewer discretion is advised.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to today's broadcast. This is the Thursday, May 14th, 2026 episode of the Marco Rubio Show, the only show where the facts are facts and hard truths thrive. Let's begin the best hour of radio, informative, uncensored, unapologetic, and ready to go. We've got lots of topics to cover today, ladies and gentlemen, and I don't want to waste any time, so let's begin our Thursday's broadcast with what's taking place in China right now. And by the way, I've been listening to some of the things that Xi has said, some of the things that Marco Rubio has said, what Trump has said. We've got to cover what's taking place in this meeting. And by the way, all the main topics I talked to you about earlier this week, the topic of Taiwan, the topic of tariffs, the topic of trade, of course, and what's going on with the war in Iran. Let's take a great look at what's taking place out of this article on NBC right now. And I think the first topic I want to hone into is the Iran war. Now, I said to you before, I believe Trump is going to go there to ask for help. What does it say in this NBC article, though, right from the start? It says here, Secretary of State Marco Rubio told NBC News in an interview on Thursday, adding that the United States was not asking Beijing for help with Iran. That is a bunch of nonsense. First and foremost, if they have nothing to ask for help, if they have no issue with what's going on, if we're very satisfied with what's taking place in this war, why are we talking to them about it then? What's the issue then? Does China have an issue with anything? Now, it says here the Chinese side said that they're not in favor of militarizing the Straits of Hormuz, and they're also not in favor of a tolling system. Again, that's out of their reach. It's totally out of China's reach. That's their position. Well, here we go. It's their strait. They can control it with Oman, and they can make a hell of a lot of money. Why would China not want that? It says here, during the wide-ranging interview, Rubio, who traveled to Beijing under the Chinese sanctions, what appears to be a first for a U.S. Secretary of State. They always do everything they can to prop up Rubio. Have you noticed that lately? He's DJing. He's in a jumpsuit. He's now being questioned about everything that's taking place now between the meeting between President Trump and Xi. Look at this. Claims that the island of Taiwan, in the case of Jimmy Lai, a pro-democracy publisher in the Chinese territory of Hong Kong, who was sentenced to 20 years in prison this year after his conviction in a landmark national security trial. What's going on with this strait, folks? Why do we need to talk to the Chinese about this? That's the number one thing. Because we need help opening it up. We cannot do it on our own. Militarily, diplomatically, we can't do it. We have to get help. And by the way, I was listening to, I believe it was Lindsey Graham, of course. The great Lindsey Graham, folks. Pete Hegseth, General Kane were speaking to him, and he's going on saying we can't trust the Pakistanis. Really? Then why do we ask them to mediate for us then? Lindsey, can you answer us that question? We need help from other countries because we on our own cannot get the Iranians to the table. That's first and foremost. Now, clearly President Trump expects Xi and, of course, the other Chinese leaders in assistance with ending this U.S.-Israeli war against Iran. Because we cannot do it. We can't do it militarily. We can't militarily open up the strait. The blockade has failed us. And now we're in this standoff over what's taking place in the Strait of Hormuz, which again is having this chokehold on the global economy. Now, this is a crucial shipping route, folks. Obviously, the Iranians understand this. It's choking our Gulf Arab neighbors, our allies in the region, excuse me. Of course, Iranians' neighbors. And it's sending the global energy supplies and sending the gas prices soaring all across the world, especially here in the United States. We're up 52%. Trump cannot abide this, especially in a midterm election year. He was hoping he was going to go in. We would take out the regime in about 72 hours. It would fall. We'd install our puppet president. But none of that took place. And now we find ourselves in this war with no way to really end it. We martyred the Ayatollah day one. Now the support for the government is Never been better. And might I add to you as well, again, I always tell you the truth. The Iranian government has never been stronger than it was right now. There's no other way to tell it to you, so I have to tell it to you how it is. The government itself is stronger than ever. By the way, Arachi came out the other day and said that they're about 120% stronger in their stockpiles because they have new technology they haven't even used as of yet. They didn't want the ceasefire. They don't need the ceasefire. Certainly, they could have continued the war. And President Trump is just scrambling to figure out a way to end this without admitting defeat. But the problem is, what other options does he have? He says he doesn't want to agree to the 10-point plan. Okay, fine. What are we going to do then? Because they're certainly not just going to give us everything we want. Now, they may make a concession here and there. But we've got to come to terms with what's going on. The oil is causing the CPI numbers, the PPI numbers. Everything is skyrocketing in terms of the economy. Trump cannot abide this in a midterm year. That's going to look very bad for the Republicans as well, if we can even keep the House. This is despite the redistricting that's taking place right now. We've got to come to terms with where we are. And we've got to find a way to end this as soon as possible without admitting a complete defeat. Now, how does Trump do that? He's got to get the Chinese involved. He's got to get the Pakistanis involved. He's got to get as many people as possible involved. I'm sure when he spoke with President Putin recently on the phone, President Putin made that very clear to stop escalating this war. Now, the talk, of course, is obviously a bluster. Oh, we've won everything. They have no military. We don't know who their leader is. That's not good enough, though. That's not going to end the war. Because it is they, the Iranians, that hold the cards. And again, it brings me no joy to tell you this, folks. We've got to stop this war. The sooner the better. And because, as Rubio has clearly stated in this, we are not immune to the global oil prices at some point because, again, we do buy from the global market. Other countries around the world are paying a much higher price as well. China is affected by it. Russia is affected by it. Europe is affected by it. Asia, South America, North America, we're all affected by this because we buy oil on a global scale. So when I hear people, for example, talking about how we're this now major exporter now of oil, of course, in which we are, and that's great, but we still have to pay those benchmark prices, folks. And we're still paying much more than we were on February the 27th. Now, Rubio went on to say, we're not asking for China's help. We don't need their help. Yeah, we do. We need as much help as we can get. Whatever we can do to get the Iranians to the table, to give us some sort of concessions. And by the way, China has also reiterated the opposition to Tehran developing their own nuclear weapon. Fine. Let's get another JCPOA-like situation and let's end this. That's the only thing we really can do at this point, can we? Well, they're not going to go down to 0% enrichment. They're not going to open up the Strait of Hormuz just on its own. There will be a toll moving forward. Let's come to terms with where we are right now. One of the other things I thought was very striking, though, about this meeting, and I want to play this for you. This is Rubio. Before they arrived in China, this is what he was saying about China's position in the world. Take a listen.
My read has been what I think has been for a while, and that is China has a plan. I mean, they clearly view themselves, they believe they will be the world's most powerful country. They'll surpass the United States, and they have a plan to do it. And they're executing on that plan, and I don't blame them. If I were the Chinese government, I'd have the same plan. We, on the other hand, don't view it that way, and we don't want to see anything. We're not trying to constrain China, but their rise cannot come at our expense. Their rise cannot come at our fall. So there's an area where we're just going to have a difference of opinion. But my view of them and of the government in China is they're very confident. They have a plan, and they're trying to execute on that plan, which is fine. I understand that from a nation-state perspective, but when that plan is in conflict with the national interest of the United States, we need to do what's right for the United States. And that'll come up on this trip, but more importantly, that'll be a feature of this relationship for a long time.
What is he talking about? At our expense? The whole idea is that what we have done is at our expense with China. Bill Clinton allowing them into the World Trade Organization in 2001. We've lost some 2.4 million jobs to China since, I believe it was 1999. 1 million of those jobs are manufacturing jobs. Everything's been at our expense, and China's only gained since then. I've told you several times in the past, from 1970 to 2000, China's GDP was in the toilet. It didn't even move. It was simply flatlining. It was dead on arrival. What does Bill Clinton do? Brings them into the World Trade Organization. We have trade deals with them. We have the outsourcing of our good-paying jobs, to which we were told, oh, we don't need those jobs. We don't need them. Yes, we do, because we need to build our middle class. So that's obviously a big gain. Now, of course, with China, we have trade deficits. Their trade surpluses with us have never been higher. And that's a reflection that we in America are not developing enough goods to sell China that we need from them in terms of imports. That's a big problem. That's why we have trade deficits. It's not because China's ripping us off, or any other country for that matter. It's because we're not producing what we would like here in this country. We need to get it from somewhere else. That's where trade deficits come in play. Now, one of the aspects of this talk was about agricultural purposes and what type of purchase they will make of our U.S. soybeans. Now, in 2025, they bought roughly 12 million metric tons of soybeans in the last couple months of 2025. Now, they've agreed to a minimum of 25 million metric tons annually for the next 3 years, which is a big win for our soybean farmers right here in the United States. Again, it's aiming to increase that support, which is great. That's great. But one of the problems we run into is, of course, by the way, I told you we can't exclude this, that 35% of the global fertilizer, the urea, the nitrogen, comes from the Middle East. Now, what are we going to do if our farmers don't have the money to do so? Or if they simply do not have the fertilizer at hand? You know, I'm looking at this article in the New American, and it's, again, foreseeing and foreshadowing a big problem with 2026. It says here, American farmers face severe challenges in 2026 planting season. Number one is the fertilizer shortages. We're looking at availability. We're looking at cost being one of the intermediate concerns. The conflict between Iran has obviously been the main driver of all this. But what's happening now, it's 50% of the nitrogen products, such as urea, are being choked off. The war in Iran was a secondary driver. Ukraine is one of the world's largest fertilizer producers as well. They've been at war with Russia for now, 4 years? 70%, let me tell you this. 70%, according to the American Farm Bureau Federation, 70% of responding farmers that are crop farmers inside the United States say they cannot afford all the fertilizer that is needed for this season's planting. And given the global supply disruptions, President Trump has announced the efforts to boost the domestic production capability and stabilize the suppliers using tariff revenues and other ways to coordinate getting more fertilizer in the United States. But what do we do when we don't have the fertilizer at hand? We don't grow. And if we don't grow, we don't have the production. And if the farmers don't have the production value, they don't make a profit, they default on their loans, or they produce less crops. And that means less supply, same amount of demand, folks. What does that mean? The prices must go up. And they get less revenue. We're seeing right now Chapter 12 farm bankruptcy filings now increase from 46% in 2025. This is according again to the American Farm Bureau Federation. Third consecutive year of rises, ladies and gentlemen. What does that do to our farmers who get up every single day and break their back for the United States? We're looking at a lot of these sharp increases, the Midwest, the Southeast. Overall, the number of U.S. farms continue to decline in, these decades-long decline we find ourselves in. What are we going to do when we have no farmers left? This is very, very troubling, and we have to be very aware of this. What do we do when we don't have the farmers that produce the corn or the soybean or whatever it may be to feed the livestock, to sell at the grocery stores? What do we do then? Do we all go back to having gardens in our backyard? I don't think so. We have to understand something. We're choking off what is called the Green Revolution here in the United States. That is, that we have enough efficient farmers that can produce enough supply to feed the entire country. We can produce a lot here in the United States. But year after year, decade after decade, we're seeing less farmers now than we have in quite some time. It brings me back to when Earl Butz, who was the agricultural secretary under Nixon, said, go big or go broke. And that's exactly what they are doing right now. They are destroying the smaller and mid-sized family farmers right now and kind of creating this corporate agricultural business right now where the big guys stay in the position to make money and the smaller farmers go out of business and the land is obsolete. So we've got to be very much aware of the farm bankruptcies, the consolidation of farms. Net farm income has fallen in recent years. We're in a lot of trouble. And if we don't get that fertilizer in because of this ridiculous war in the Middle East, farmers in the United States will go out of business. You can mark my words on that one, folks. This is not good at all. And again, that brings me back to where we are with this China deal. We are talking about a high level of production, but what happens when we don't make our commitment? What happens when it's force majeure? We cannot commit to our obligations. What happens to these farmers? They go out of business. Less revenue coming into the United States. It's going to be problematic. And Trump has got to see this. Now, one of the other things they discussed as well was the suspension of tariffs. That means China will suspend all retaliatory tariffs imposed on United States agricultural products since May of 2025. And again, this includes tariffs on things like chicken, wheat, corn, cotton, other key commodities, which have been kind of strained in the trade relations with China for quite some time. One of the other things we've got to talk about here, this is very crucial, this one. We've got to talk about what's taking place with the rare earth minerals. And China right now has included in this deal provisions for China to issue general licensing for the export of rare earth minerals to the United States. And the reason why this is such a massive loss for the United States, number one, China can pull these licenses whenever they want. Never forget, I told you they produce the refining for roughly over 90% of all the rare earths all over the world. And at this time, if China decides to limit it or simply pull the license, what do we do then? We have to have these rare earths for our military, for our missiles to work, for the technology we have inside the United States, especially for AI. We need all these rare earths, ladies and gentlemen. We have to have them. And if China decides, because they feel like it, to pull out the rug from under us, we're left with absolutely nothing. It's going to destroy our economy. It's going to destroy our standing in the world. We have to have rare earths. And by the way, I told you this before. If, for example, the United States decides to get on board with developing and refining here in the United States, there's plans underway. This takes time too, by the way. China's heavily invested in this. That's why China's leading, and I told you India will be number 2. And if the United States decides to get on board with this, we'll probably be number 3. But we haven't even had the blueprints for these factories inside the United States to get up and running yet. And this is something we need to get on board with right away. We should not be at another country's will, especially number 2, China, globally, to be refining all of our rare earths. It's simply not going to work for us. Trump has got to get this moving, and moving fast. And by the way, it's going to create lots of good paying jobs too inside the United States. What could be better than this? This is the future, ladies and gentlemen. Refining rare earths. By the way, we used to be the number 1 refiner in the 1970s of rare earths. Rare earths didn't just fall out of the sky. It's been around for quite some time. Now we're seeing the benefit of it and moving forward with artificial intelligence. So why not take advantage of it? We can do this. We know we can do this. We have the resources to do this. We have the ingenuity to do this. We have the willpower to need to do this. We should be doing this right away. So why Congress is stalling on these plans, I have no idea. But we need to get working with this. This should be up front and center for the Trump administration. And this will be a major win for President Trump. Make no mistake about this. Let's get on board with this. Let's get moving away from the dependency so much from China for these imports to the United States. Let's bring the manufacturing back. Let's make incentives for these companies to bring their business back to the United States. And let's get away from the hollowing middle class that we continue to see here in America. But first and foremost, the rare earth minerals should be refined by the United States that we need, that we know we need right away. That would make us less dependent on China, and that would make other countries invest in the United States. Remember, China takes up roughly over, I want to say 92% at least. Let's get this working here in the United States, folks. I think that would be a major win for the United States. Right now, again, being dependent on China like this, especially at a crucial time when we know they want to take over. They want to be the number one global superpower. I told you on yesterday's show, they felt that the 19th century was that of Great Britain. The 20th century was that of the United States. And they think the 21st century is going to be that of China. This is what their plan is. Make no mistake about it. This is what they want. Marco Rubio just told you, hey, they have ambition to be number one. We shouldn't do anything to facilitate that. Then great. Let's get on board with the refining of the rare earths. Let's get in control of the AI, because that is the future. Any way you want to look at that. You know, we can talk about different aspects of it with data centers and what have you, spying on Americans. Nobody wants that part of it. But let's get on board with producing. Let's get on board with the manufacturing and the refining. It's very easy to solve a lot of this, ladies and gentlemen. We just have to have the willpower to do it. And I think we certainly can do that. We have the great minds to do so. One of the other things I talked about, too, was, according to the trade, was about the fentanyl coming in the United States. And what they're saying now is that China is going to be agreeing to take significant steps to halt the flow of the precursors used to manufacture fentanyl coming into the U.S. First of all, if I was President Trump, the number one thing I would say, if we're continuing to see this fentanyl flow into the United States, we know it's coming from chemicals produced by you. We know you're sending it to the Mexican drug cartels, whom you work with, who flood this into the United States onto American streets. That kill roughly 400,000 Americans every single year, at least. It's extremely potent. It's 50 to 100 times more potent than heroin. If this becomes a problem still, there will be penalties for this. There will be penalties. We'll have to either halt some sort of production with you or trade with you or something, some sort of penalty. But this shouldn't just be something we just discuss and then, of course, nothing comes from it. The problem is still there. And by the way, while we're at it, folks, let's close the southern border. Let's get the border wall working. Let's get that up and running. Let's create a barrier between us and Mexico. We have to. At this point, we have to. And let's put our troops there, folks. We're bringing home, 5,000 troops from Germany? Let's put them on the southern border to stop the flow of humans, drugs, weapons, you name it, human trafficking. This has got to stop. It needs to stop right away. Let's get a permanent structure. Let's make sure we're controlling our waterways. How many times have we seen boats showing up to the shores of San Diego? People running right into the city. And people are sitting there appalled by this. They're shocked seeing people jump off a boat and then just run into America. Where's the Coast Guard? Where are the submarines? Oh, yeah, that's right. The Obama administration pulled those up. We used to have submarines monitoring our waters. We don't have that anymore in the United States. We have to control our borders and we have to control our waterways, first and foremost. How many times are we going to see boats showing up to the shores of Florida with people jumping off them? And then, of course, we take them right into our country. Enough is enough. We've got to make sure we're controlling our borders, first and foremost. And when we do that, the flow of fentanyl will cease to exist if we actually enforce that and confiscate it before it comes into America. Let's do that first and foremost, ladies and gentlemen. Come on. Obviously, we can do this. We choose not to. It's very upsetting as a result of this. By the way, one of the last things they talked about during this agreement was to kind of aim to keep China's markets further. What am I trying to say here? The Chinese markets kind of working with good trade opportunities, reducing the barriers that have been in place for many years. They're trying to work out a deal with all that. Fine, good, great. Again, I told you before, I'm all about having good trade relations with other countries. But let's make sure we're not letting the other issues with China. We talked yesterday about how we have a mayor of Arcadia working in tandem with the CCP to make the CCP look more palatable to the American people. That's got to stop. That sort of treason has got to stop. The spying on American citizens, that's got to stop. We talked about the balloon that traversed the United States under the Biden administration. This spying, this buying of farmland next to military bases has got to stop. And there needs to be harsh penalties for the people of which that do that. And by the way, also the Chinese showing up to our southern border. We saw that during the Biden administration. That's got to stop as well. We know China is purposely sending these people into the United States. And by the way, I would say if the fentanyl, if the trade opportunities are not fixed, we're not going to send any of your students to the United States. All 600,000 of them can go someplace else. We're not going to have that in the United States anymore. You will not replace American citizens with Chinese nationals in the United States if we don't work on this. That would be the fentanyl. That would, of course, be the licensing for the rare earth minerals. The reduction of the tariffs. And by the way, I didn't get any information about the tariffs and the sanctions that the United States is putting on Iran right now and the secondary sanctions that are being placed on Hong Kong, for example. I didn't see anything about that being off the table, so I'm interested to see if that did take place. But we've got to get better trade policies with China, folks, and we can easily do that. And by the way, folks, let's move on. And this article is out of the Washington Examiner. This is very, very important. And it says here that OPEC countries have now cut output as demand slows due to the Hormuz blockade. Now, this is going to be devastating. We already talked about how the global supply has been in a chokehold over what's taking place with this war, that Iran now controls the Strait of Hormuz moving forward. Anything that passes through that strait right now is going to cost at least $2 million. That's going to be very devastating. When the ships now have to charge $2 million more to the goods that are being transferred to their said destination. Now that's going to cost even more. Way to go, America. We didn't have this before. Now we have this problem. So now the countries that are part of the OPEC, the intergovernmental organization, that are really seeing the oil markets, we're now seeing that they are now cutting their output as demand has slowed due to the higher energy prices amid the Iran war. And the slowed down demand, in turn, has led the OPEC countries to check out their oil forecasts and look at the demand growth for the year. Now, in the latest months, we're looking at the group of petroleum exporting countries lowering its 2026 forecast from 1.38 million barrels per day to roughly 1.17 million. So we're seeing a bit of a dip in that. We've got to come to terms with the fact that, ladies and gentlemen, the amount of oil that is going to be on the markets very, very soon is going to be completely gone. That means nothing is coming out from the Persian Gulf. And at some time, the oil benchmarks, the people in charge of energy, when they see nothing is coming into their country, nothing to refine, nothing to put on the market, that's going to have a devastating effect on the global economy. It's going to cause a global meltdown. It really is. There will be turmoil as a result of this. And again, the overall production among the OPEC members has fallen by more than 30%, or 9.7 million barrels per day since this war began. And before the war, the Strait of Hormuz, the ships were carrying 20 million barrels of crude oil and petroleum products every single day. That is no longer in effect. And that's happened for the better part of 100 days. Let's just make sure that's very clear. We understand that some ships have gone to destinations like China and what have you. But the waterway right now is effectively closed off. Unless, of course, you decide that you will communicate with the Iranian government. You'll pay the $2 million in the rial or the yuan, and you'll be on your way. Now, even if, for example, Iran, for some reason, decided today they will open up the Strait of Hormuz, let's say that did take place. I'm in a generous mood, let's say that happened. It would still take roughly 6 months to demine the entire strait to make sure it's safe for passage. But you're still stuck with paying that fee right now. And by the way, the countries that have aided and abetted the United States and Israel in this illegal war also have to pay damage control to the Iranians and the Omanis. I mean, this is going to be, again, the amount of money that will be spent on these ships coming through will be astronomical. And the Iranians are going to make a lot of money on this, roughly probably about $100 billion every single year. Just let that sink in right now. They have a source of income coming into their country now that will be paid in their currency, not the US dollar, because we started this illegal war. Now, what do you think? China is going to come in at the behest of the United States and say, listen, you're not going to charge the fees? Of course they will. Because why would they want them to pay in the Chinese yuan? That's going to boost up their currency. It's going to boost up the Iranian currency. This is a major win for the Iranians. We have no control over it because they control everything between their shores and 12 miles into that strait. And the Omanis control the other half of it. It's only a 21-mile strait, ladies and gentlemen. It's not international waters, as Marco Rubio will falsely tell you, or the Lindsey Grahams of the world. They will control that strait, and they will make a lot of money off it, too. Way to go, United States. None of this needed to happen. None of this needed to happen. And it's a very, very big problem. Now, OPEC's optimistic demand growth forecast for the next year is 1.54 million barrels per day, an increase from its previous estimate of 1.34 million barrels per day. That's what we're saying. We're seeing here in this article. Now, the UAE has recently withdrawn from OPEC, which has distanced itself from the Saudis, which obviously leads the group. And the UAE was OPEC's third largest oil producer last month, so its departure delivers something of a notable blow to the international alliance. But really, this isn't a big problem. It really isn't. They're still aiming to put out roughly 5 million barrels of oil per day by 2027, whereas OPEC was limiting the amount that they can put out. So, again, the UAE being an OPEC really isn't a big deal. They will still put their oil in the markets when it is safe for them to do so. Now, when that happens, only time will tell. Whatever President Trump decides to get to the table and to give into the concessions by the Iranians, maybe gets a nuclear deal with them again, makes some sort of JCPOA, which he left, by the way, that allowed them to continue to enrich uranium. Before they were at 3.67% total enrichment. That was the deal under the JCPOA. That went away in 2019. And he replaced it with absolutely nothing, and at the behest, at the guidance of the Lindsey Grahams of the world. Just let me be clear with you on that one. So when Lindsey Graham is all up in arms about what's taking place, my God, they're enriching uranium to 60%. Well, the one thing that was preventing them from doing that was the JCPOA, and you replaced it with nothing. So 7 years later, we're shocked that they're enriching uranium? Give me a break. It's all smoke and mirrors, folks. It's all complete theater. And again, it's no good for the world. All right, let's move on to another very pressing topic just really quickly before we move on. And I know we have some other very important articles we need to discuss right now. There was an Indian cargo vessel that was sunk off the coast of Oman after suspected drones attacked the ship. This ship was traveling from Somalia carrying livestock, I'm told. And the ship had sank, and I'm told that the 14 crew members on board were then rescued by the Omanis, but there's no word on who actually attacked the ship, and there was no word on if the livestock was saved. I find that very, very disgusting. If all the animals perished on the ship. You know, I hate seeing things like this, folks. I really do. A ship sunk for absolutely no reason? They were sending livestock to I think they were sending it to Dubai, if I'm not mistaken, or someplace in the UAE. But this is awful, folks. Who wants to see this? Who wants to see animals slaughtered like this for absolutely no reason? It's just very troubling. So not really much of a development on this yet. But we will figure out what happened. What took place was the ship was hit with the drones and it caught fire and then it eventually sank. So very awful to see this. The Ministry of External Affairs called the attack unacceptable, of course. And again, we have to figure out exactly who was attacking these ships. Is this a false flag during the negotiations with China to make Iran look bad? Or is this the United States sending out drones or another country nearby doing this? I mean, what is the purpose of all this? Is this another false flag? These are the questions we should have to ask answers to. We need to know what's going on. Who is doing this? And I hope whoever did this will be held accountable. And by the way, if the Iranians did it, of course they should be held accountable as well. No one should be attacking ships simply like this, I would think. You know, folks, I have some questions here I want to ask to you, my listeners, of course. You know, we talk about culture many times on the program. And this article in ZeroHedge kind of illustrates where we are as a people right here inside the United States. And the title says, "Where have the men gone?" It's a question I often ask myself. Where have the men gone? The Department of Labor keeps track of all the employment here inside the United States and, of course, the demographics. And their latest report on men in the labor force is very, very alarming, I would say at the very least. And it should be to you listening. Now, it turns out that the labor force is missing some 7 million men who would otherwise be working right now. And close to a third of the working age men have vanished from the labor force. Now, there are several things of which attribute to this. I would say one of the big factors would have been during COVID, when they told people to don't go to work, sit at home, collect your, little stimulus check every month or so. Really getting the universal basic income to be ingrained into men and women alike. But the labor force participation rate among the prime age of men, that would be 25 to 54 years of age, in the 1950s was very close to 90%, almost approaching 100%. Now that number is 89%, ladies and gentlemen. Meaning 11% are not in the workforce. Now they're looking for work or working. And when you look at the men over the age of 16, the rate is devastatingly low. It's 66%, so roughly a third are gone from the workforce. Now, among American-born men, nearly 22% are now gone. What's going on? This is very shocking. Now, I remember I started working when I was roughly, I think it was 14 years old. Had a job working on the weekends, just getting a little bit of extra cash on me. I mean, obviously I wasn't trying to save up for anything, but I had a job. And even before that, I had been working previously in the summertime. But where is the drive for young men to work anymore? Why is this not something that has been ingrained in them? Remember, this all comes from the parenting, by the way. Now, I was fortunate enough to work with my father in the summertime, but I saw people working. I was around people that worked hard, too, and no one was complaining. People were out working hard, working long hours. And I saw that, and that was instilled in me, and that work ethic was instilled in me. But that's something that doesn't happen much anymore. And when kids don't see that as a role model or something that is very important to them, that they need to go and work, that should be something expected of them. And when they get this idea in their head that someone else will work for them, that's a pretty alarming thing to have in a civil society, the number one country in the world right now. Now, we can look at other things. We can look at things like mental disorders, substance abuse, obesity, chronic disease, low motivation, pharmaceutical injury, other things, demoralization, lethargy. I mean, there's so many things we could talk about, but the idea is why? Why is this? Why is this taking place? Now, we look at some statistics that are very troubling. For example, in this article, the number of men who now live with their parents has tripled since the 1950s. That's obviously a big part of it. The lack of obligation to get out and work, to make something of yourself. We talk about several things. For example, any self-respecting male would have probably been at 18, either been in college or out working at the time. This is in the 1950s, of course. Finding himself a bride, setting up their own family, buying their first home. Remember I told you not too long ago, probably a couple months ago, by age 22, 23, most Americans bought their first home by then, in the 1950s and 60s. That was the average age you bought your home. The average age. Today, that number, ladies and gentlemen, is sitting around 40. So something has gone terribly wrong in our culture. And I can only express to you, obviously bringing in 1 million legal immigrants into the country every single year, when we don't need to do that. We have 40 to 50 million illegal aliens inside the country right now taking up housing. That's a big problem. And when you have another 55 million people here that have overstayed their visas in some way or another, again, taking up housing, taking up jobs, that's a problem. So when you have a third of the people that live inside the United States, I know that's a startling number too, by the way, but those are the current statistics right now. And some of you will say, well, Gervais, how did you come to that? Why should I believe you, Gervais? Well, let me just outline this for you. Right before Joe Biden took office, good old lunch bucket Joe, right before he took office, it was estimated that roughly 22 to 25 million people living in the United States had come to this country illegally. Now, ladies and gentlemen, Joe Biden let in roughly 12 to 20 million, and again, I probably would go with that higher number, illegals into the United States. They allowed that to take place. So if we add 20 million to roughly 25, at the bare minimum, probably, I would have to say, that's not even including kids that are born here in the United States, of parents that are of legal status. And we do know that exists, by the way, and that's why Trump is fighting this birthright citizenship right now, case with SCOTUS. You're looking at 45 million illegal, 45 to 50 million illegal aliens here. And that number, obviously, released by the government, that there's 55 million visa holders that have stayed their visit right here in the United States. Folks, that's over 100 million people. Now, we have roughly 340 million Americans, well, people living in America right now, I should say. That's a lot of people that are here that are not supposed to be here. This is what happens when you, again, have, for example, we had very limited immigration in this country from about 1920 to about 1965. Then, of course, we had the great Lyndon Baines Johnson. We had Teddy Kennedy. We had a Hart-Celler Act, of course. They pushed this on the American people. They said, the demographics of the United States will not change. They said that. Now, of course, I wasn't alive at the time, but, that's what they said. They signed that into law, and of course, they changed the formula of where they brought people into this country. It changed from Europe, primarily. That was the number one country. Very little pockets all around the world, of course. And that changed to bring in people from the third world. And what took place as a result of that? You have more people coming in and taking these menial jobs. And as a result of that, a lot of the jobs that young kids would take. So when I look at this number and say, why are 16 and 17-year-olds, 18, 19-year-olds not working right now? They should be. But when you have people coming in from the third world, and they take those jobs that a kid would take perhaps after school, maybe bussing tables, washing dishes, again, menial labor tasks, doing things of that. That's a big problem when they're no longer there to take those jobs because someone else is coming and taking them. Maybe a college student working part-time takes that morning job and they go to class at night. Maybe, a kid after high school, 3 o'clock to 7 o'clock, works another job or something along those lines. They're not taking those jobs that are necessary for them to get their foot in the door to, again, understand how to make money, to, again, understand what it means to have a part-time job, showing up on time, dressing appropriately, obviously speaking with clients or customers alike. learning how to do all those things, understanding how to, how getting paid works and, taxation and what have you. Well, that goes away when people come in and start taking those jobs, or simply they're pushed out of the workforce because they have either illegal aliens working those jobs or they have other people taking those jobs. So this is, again, a part of the problem. So the problem's been in set for quite some time. 100%. For quite some time, the problem's been an issue here. And as a general principle, we know that a man without a job now is only going to get even sicker, right? The whole society suffers from their absence. And again, we can look at these excuses, what people use. But one of the things I thought was interesting in this article, I got to tell you this. When we look at who is taking these jobs, right? When we look at who is now in the workforce, what took place in the 1960s? We saw women starting to enter the workforce in larger numbers. We saw less stay-at-home mothers or homemakers, if you will. And we saw more women going to work, women taking those jobs, more women going to college. In fact, there's more women going to college now than ever before. And I don't say this because I think it's a bad thing that women go to college or that they're independent. But we have to understand something. When we have women who decide not to go to work or to work aside their spouse, jobs that maybe would have gone to men, or when we have, 70, 80% women working in, for example, what is it? What is that called? I can't think of the name of it now. Oh, what is it? Well, it'll come to me in a moment. The field that they go into right now. But when the jobs are going more towards women, is what I'm trying to say, or more women are becoming doctors or lawyers, and we all say, well, that's great. Well, then you're pushing men out of these jobs. And when you have these quotas that these jobs have, that there are a certain amount of women, that also takes the opportunity for men who are also competing for those jobs to not have those jobs. And that becomes a big problem. I think everyone would probably agree with me on that. That's a big issue. So, in a time like today when women obviously expect the male to still lead, and those men are kind of being pushed out of these positions, obviously that's a very big problem. And what do you do about that? How do you change something like that? We've never seen things like this. We've only experienced this for, a couple decades now. So again, it's very interesting to see these things taking place. At some point, men used to know their roles in society. As the protector, as the provider, of course. That dynamic is being shifted away from right now. The term boss babe, or, I could use other words too to describe that. That's being put in the way right now. And I want to explain something to you, by the way. I'll share something with you. When I was teaching in California, I was teaching in a school in Los Angeles, right? The belly of the beast. Liberal Central, okay, fine, whatever. I was teaching at a school, and I remember they had a day for women, I should say children, but young women, to go to see an orientation to enter the engineering field. I said, oh, good, that's great. They're going to have them come for all the 8th graders to come in. They said, no. It's only for the females. And I thought to myself, well, why would you exclude the men from this? Well, the boys from this, excuse me. Doesn't make any sense. But why would we be excluding someone's interest, for example, if they're interested in some type of engineering field? Why wouldn't you include everybody? Do you see what I'm trying to tell you right now? On the psyche of the boys, there was no push for them to go into, for example, engineering or what have you. It was just for the women. So what does that tell the boys, especially at that young age? It tells them not to get involved, not to do anything. So, my point in telling you all this, again, they're pushing boys at a young age to to not, I guess the word I want to use is to get involved with or to assert themselves. They're seeing the girls get those opportunities, and the girls are going to go to this orientation for engineering, or maybe for the medical field, or for the law field. And boys, you just sit here, you do your own thing. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. And that's having a dramatic effect on the young male psyche. Where do they fit in this world if they're being excluded outright in the public school system from attending these things and maybe garnering some interest, if you will? It's something that is, something that is obviously not leading to nothing that is good. And when we have, roughly now a third of working age men now slipping into a life of nihilism, it's time to sound the alarm, ladies and gentlemen. We're much past that time where we need to fix this. And again, I only say this to you because it's extremely troubling to me to see an article like that. So it kind of brought me back a little bit to remembering that position where I was like, why are we excluding the boys? Why? Why would we do that? Why not bring in everybody? Why is it just geared towards the women, the girls? It doesn't make any sense to me. And one other, another topic that doesn't make any bit of any sense to me, ladies and gentlemen, this is out of the Washington Times. It says here, Feds slapped California with a $1.3 billion penalty in light of a massive fraud reimbursement. And, I told you before, Minnesota was the tip of the iceberg for fraud. Why not look at California, New York, Illinois, a lot of these blue states, these blue cities where this fraud is ripe and up front and center? Now, Vice President J.D. Vance delivered a loud warning to states on Wednesday to get a handle on their fraud, especially in the Medicaid programs, saying that they'll lose federal money if they don't take the issue more seriously. Now, what he announced was that the Department of Health and Human Services is withholding $1.3 billion in reimbursement payments to California for its failures in this arena. The government also announced that it had suspended some 800 hospice programs in the greater Los Angeles area, thinking that they were part of a massive fraud to claim payments for Americans who are dying. Now, Vice President Vance said that we're trying to save the Medicaid program from its dysfunctional state bureaucrats right now. Now, the move comes as a major anti-fraud push from this administration. By the way, very good on this, by the way, where we've wasted so much of the taxpayer dollars on a lot of these schemes right now, whether it be hospice or, for example, what we saw in terms of educational centers or, God knows what else it was in Minneapolis. But the problem is it runs deep. They apply for these programs, there's no oversight of them, and they end up pocketing this money because they're not even offering these services. And again, this should not be happening in this country, by the way. And again, the move is part of a greater anti-fraud push, which again argues that hundreds of billions of dollars flow each year to these fraudsters who range from small-time opportunists to these criminal syndicates to foreign governments. Let's put an end to that right away. Let's put an end to that right away. Well, this should not be happening, folks. It really shouldn't. First of all, why is the government involved in giving out this money anyways? This is where the problem happens. They allocate this money, they give it out to people, they do no follow-up, and these people get away rich on this. It's disgusting. And your taxpayer dollars don't go to what it's intended to helping people. Hospice, these other programs which they use. It says here, Kim Brandt, the Deputy Administrator for the Center for Medical and Medicaid Services, said that for decades the government has been operated on a pay-and-chase model. This practice has been for the feds to shovel money out the door, only later to find out that it was spent incorrectly. It's just stupid when you look at these things. Now, she said that the Trump administration last year set up a war room to try to head off some of the payments up front, and over that time, it has blocked some $2 million in money that it could be paid out from. Vice President Vance said that the fraud is a problem in both the GOP-led and Democrat-led states, and it said that the promises of cooperation on both sides of the aisle has taken place, but he said that there are some states that have been resisting largely some of the blue states. California has repeatedly surfaced as one of those. Oh, yeah, California. Good old Gavin Newsom. And speaking of Gavin Newsom, it says that his office said that for example, the CMS program, for the nationwide moratorium on certifying new hospices for Medicaid, Newsom said that the idea in 2022, said earlier this year, he said he called the Trump administration to adopt this nationwide. Now, what was this program for? The program is to obviously get more money. Remember when, for example, Tim Walz, good old Tim Walz, on the debate stage for VP in 2024 said we need to get more money allocated for a lot of these wonderful programs. And what do these wonderful programs do? They kick money back to people like him. They donate to people like him. Last week, Vice President Vance said that 168,000 people the government has listed are deceased in receiving food stamps, for example. Who is taking this money? Who is cashing in on this? So this means, obviously, that someone is illegally collecting these benefits and making a hell of a lot of money off this, too, by the way. And just to compare this, Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison sued, seeking to keep the money flowing into his wonderful states. Oh, yeah. A federal judge rejected that, allowing the withholding to stand. Well, folks, I'd like to tell you that the rot doesn't run deep, but the rot does run deep. And we waste billions of dollars every single year of taxpayer money on these fraudulent programs because there is no oversight. There is no accountability. And this is something that needs to end yesterday. Let's hope that it ends very, very soon. All right, folks, one more thing I want to go over before we end today's program. Got a few minutes remaining. This is out of Front Page Magazine. It says here that the public school exodus is now starting to hit Texas. I think this is a fantastic thing, by the way. And again, someone who has a background in education can tell you that this is something that should be really something that most parents begin to start looking at. We see the public school system failing our kids. They're not treating them right. They're not teaching them. And they're simply just becoming indoctrination centers for socialism and, I don't know, the LGBTQ, XYZ, WTV. I don't know what else they do, to be honest with you. They're certainly not teaching your kids to critically think or to compute or to read at grade level. So what's the point of it? Now it says that it says here that more money keeps from being spent for worse results and from fewer students. That's what the teachers' unions don't want you to know. And a Texas school district is now facing a statewide enrollment decline that could deepen in the years ahead. Lawmakers were told at a hearing in Austin on Monday. Now, the warning comes as districts across North Texas, including Fort Worth, Richardson, I believe it's called Coppell, and Grand Prairie, have all shuttered schools or seriously discussed closures with grappling and shrinking class sizes. Texas Education Commissioner Mike Morath told legislators that the state lost some 75,000 students just one year. And he says, we cannot tell you the precise cause of this. Well, I can probably think of a couple things. Number one, parents are not happy with the results they're getting. Let's take Dallas, for example. Less than half of the students are on par on reading. Only 43 are proficient in math. And Dallas itself has given itself a B. Now, if it had gotten a B for getting 43% on a math test, it would have been seen as a straight A student. I mean, they do things like change the grading scale. They lower the standards, so you think your kid's an A student, and yet they know nothing. It's ridiculous. And by the way, I've seen this several times in the past. We look at things, for example, I look to California, where I had taught for several years. And again, I tell you this, when you do not fail, when a student fails, and you don't hold that student back, and that student keeps getting pushed forward, how do they keep up? Ladies and gentlemen, how do they keep up, do you think? They don't. So how do you keep getting them through the system? You lower the standards. Absolutely. And I'll just tell you that school district that I was in, that I just told you about, that was aiming towards opportunities in the future for careers for the young girls. That same school district was teaching kids at the English language development level. Using those standards. Those are standards for kids that are English as a second language. Does that not tell you that things are wrong here in this country, folks? So I think homeschooling will be something that is more intriguing, more enticing for parents as time goes on. And by the way, there are many different ways you can swing this too. But I think it's time to return education to the families and students to stop, being funneled through and getting these unions rich. Don't you think so? I think so too, folks. I think it's something we should look into. All right, folks, that's all we have for today. Thank you for being here as always. I appreciate you so much. Make sure you're staying prepped as always. Food, water, medicine, fuel, money, gold in these times of uncertainty. Enjoy the rest of your day. I'll see you back here tomorrow for more groundbreaking news on the next Marco Dre Show. Until then, be good, stay busy. God bless.